With its rich lore and numerous iterations, KOF has certainly a big deal of iconic moments that are forever burned into our memories, like funny interactions between characters, the inclusion of a fan-favorite fighter, or the satisfying ending of a whole era. And then there are these surprising moments that nobody saw it coming. Either it's an ending, a mid-game cutscene, a stage that makes no sense, or a character's unpredicted behavior. These are the moments that I was not expecting to see and made me scratch my head trying to figure out what was going on. Obviously, this is a very subjective list, so it's okay and totally normal to have a different opinion. Without further ado, here's the top 10 WTF moments in the KOF games. Bosses in KOF always die after the big final showdown. However, there are two exceptions to this rule: Rugal in 94 and Mukai in 2003. Let's focus on the latter for this entry. He was presented as the true final boss and the main antagonist of that game. Mukai introduced us to the villainous group of the Tale of Ash saga, known as Those from the Past, of which he was a member. The game did a good job establishing him as a fearful and intimidating foe. For instance, the player has to meet some requirements just to have a chance to face him, and even after beating Mukai, he didn't look defeated at all. Actually, he seemed completely fine and unfazed. That led many of us to think that he has yet a major role to play in the future. Maybe he'll be a playable character, or we will face him again as a boss or a mid-boss. So you can imagine our shock when we saw him getting killed so easily and unceremoniously by his master's hand in KOF 13. It turns out he was kept alive just to show us later how strong and scary Saiki is, which is a debatable thing. I personally find him more annoying than anything else. This entry is pretty unique since it doesn't concern an event or a character, but a location. I'm talking about Omega Rugal stage in KOF 98. Most of us had a chance to face this iconic boss in previous games, namely KOF 94 and 95, but the Rugal of 98 is very different though. First, he has two forms, a regular one with nerfed moves from his aforementioned versions, and his boss form, where he looks less human and more of an enraged monster. This beastly aura of his is due for the most part to the stage where we have to fight him. The game does a fantastic job setting the mood for this encounter with dark and unsettling imagery. Once the cutscene ends, we get to witness one of the creepiest stages in the entire series. There is just too many things wrong with this place, like why this tub is full of blood. Did Rugal turned into a vampire? Are these skulls real, or are they just part of his twisted sense of decoration? Whose eyes is this? Why are we underwater? But like many things in life, I think it's better if these questions remain unanswered. Back to KOF 2003, one of the key figures of that game is Chizuru, when it was revealed that she was the actual host of the tournament. Her importance is further accentuated by being the cause of the presence of the mid-boss Kusanagi and the sub-boss, her long-dead sister Maki. The reveal of her twin sister was a surprising twist, as most gamers thought that she was actually brought back from the dead thanks to the Yata mirror, implying that this secret treasure is much more powerful than we thought before. Maki was always believed to be the stronger of the Kagura sisters, and having to face her as an opponent with the help of Chizuru was quite intimidating. But once the duo defeated, we finally learned that it was not the real Maki, but just an illusion created by the mind-controlled Chizuru. It's noteworthy that it was not the first time where we had to face Maki. In KOF 96, if the Secret Treasures team was used by the player, Chizuru is replaced by Maki as the sub-boss of the game with a unique cutscene. Although it's not canon, it was a nice touch, but her presence in 2003 was, in my opinion, much more memorable. I remember the first time I played KOF 99 and saw its character select screen. The fact that teams were composed of 4 instead of 3 members like previous games was surprising enough, but my biggest shock was the presence of not 1, not 2, but of 3 different Kyos. I initially thought Kyo2 to be the real one, as his moveset was mainly based on the 98 version of Kyo, but I was wrong. The characters named Kyo 1 and 2 were merely clones. The real Kyo no longer dresses up as a high school student, and he took off his bandana. Also, he has completely new techniques that were never seen before. All this is just from a pure gameplay perspective, because story-wise, things get even crazier. The Nest Saga went all in with the cloning plot. As the main villain of the game Chrysalid explained, there wasn't just 2, but thousands of Kyo clones created to dominate the world, and that without counting other characters who were infused by Kyo's DNA and were also called clones. But at that time, the young me had absolutely no idea what he was talking about, and the whole thing was just very confusing. I remember how this scene in particular, showing the army of the said clones, made me feel extremely uneasy and utterly lost. Let's stay with KOF 99 for this entry as well, but far from all these cloning shenanigans. Kim and his 2 unfortunate partners were an essential trio since the very beginning of the series. Unlike with other teams, they were joined by a 4th member in 99, Kim's childhood friend and rival Jun. Up to this point, Chang and Choi had been through hell under the tutelage of Kim, enduring his hellish training and unforgiving sense of justice. Things got even worse somehow with the arrival of Jun, who wanted to prove that he is a better trainer by submitting the 2 criminals to literal torture in the form of his own workout routine. So it was safe to assume that Chang and Choi would have been pretty fed up with all that, to the point to murder the 2 Taekwondo masters at the end of KOF 99. They had a strong motive, and they were convicted criminals after all. The brutality of the killing, although very shocking, made perfect sense. And I truly believe that this was really the end of Kim and Jun. It's not the first time that major characters would die during an ending either. But as it turned out, it was just a fantasy of the 2 fugitives, and they would never have the courage to realize it. But still, for a moment, they totally got me. Here's other characters' death scene, but this time it's not a joke. The ending of the Orochi team in KOF 97. This scene depicts the trio trying to revive Orochi, but despite all their efforts of collecting the fighters' energy during the tournament, they fail. Subsequently, their leader's death was imminent. As a last-ditch effort, they decided to give their own life and sacrifice themselves to revive the being. Yashiro kills Chris and Chermi, then takes his own life in a very gruesome way. Chris's death scene in particular is the most shocking. The blood on his neck has the exact same color as the red background, giving the impression that his head was severed from his body. The scene ends with the revival of Orochi, meaning that their sacrifice did work after all. It's important to note that this ending is not canon, as the true events of the story unfolded a bit differently. Orochi used Grace's body to materialize, but the sacrifice of Chermi and Yashiro still took place, and although we never got to see it, it's safe to say that their death wasn't that different from their ending scene. Let's talk about everyone's favorite boss in the series, Magaki. As one of Psyche's servants and a member of those from the past, he was initially presented as a shady human responsible of hosting KOF 11, and truth is, there isn't much to say about his human form. But after defeating Shion, Magaki makes a bombastic intro and reveals his true colors, the Awakening form. He is by far the creepiest looking boss in the entire series. While other villains have this kind of proud and arrogant demeanor, Magaki, with his constant twitching, pink skin, pointy ears, big blue alien eyes, and abnormally long arms, is quite unique design-wise. He looks like an edgier version of Majin Buu. I personally like his design a lot. It's so different from the rest of the bosses. Actually, there is a lot to like about Magaki. The stage where the fight takes place is very stylish, and his theme is one of the best soundtracks reserved for a boss. Then of course the combat starts, along with the curses and swearing from the player, and the only thing you'll remember is how unfair, frustrating, and unlikable Magaki is. And here comes the original big baddie of KOF. Oroshi's reveal was, and still is, one of the most iconic moments in the franchise. Even after defeating all his followers in previous games, the threat of the mythical serpent was still present and was inevitably culminated by its return at the end of KOF 97. But things did not happen according to plan. Orochi was forced to use the body of one of his followers, the most innocent looking among them, to take physical form, and so he did not have all his strength when the three Sacred Treasures team fought him, and was also forced to have Chris's white pants on, but at least his sneakers changed into shoes, because anime's logic. The setting of the battle was one of the highlights of the game, with a stage that apparently takes place in the middle of nowhere, and the creepy quiet theme, The Origin of Mind, that contrasted a lot with the previous epic soundtrack of the Orochi team. Canonically speaking, Orochi is the strongest character in the entire series and simply cannot be killed, which makes his return always a nightmare that keeps our heroes from sleeping soundly at night. This entry is special. It's not about a cutscene, a stage or an ending. It's one of the most disturbing moments that came out of nowhere during a pure gameplay sequence. The star of this horrifying act is none other than everyone's favorite angel, Weiss. There are plenty of crazy characters in KOF, and since her debut in '96, Weiss was considered to be the first female figure to fit in this category. She never tries to hide her cruel and sadistic nature, but I had no idea that in addition of being completely insane, Weiss is also a cannibal. During her hidden desperate super move in KOF 2002 Unlimited match, Weiss slowly walks towards her opponent. The moment they attack her, she counters it by throwing them on the ground, laughing hysterically and jumping on them before the screen fades to black. Then we are forced to listen to an extremely unsettling sound effect, the sound of Weiss biting and chewing on her victim. When the screen comes back, Weiss has already finished her meal and is wiping her mouth with her sleeve. What a delicate woman. Before getting to the number 1 spot, here's some honorable mentions.
Round 1.
There is a reason why KOF 97 is considered as the darkest episode in the entire series. Between the resurrection of Orochi, the gruesome sacrifice of the New Faces team, and the uncertain fate of Kyo and Iori after the last showdown, the game is in no shortage of iconic moments, but we can all agree that one scene in particular stands out as a true nightmare, at least when we witnessed it the first time. It's the moment when Iori and Leona gives in to the Riot of the Blood Curse. Before 97, Iori was never presented as a nice guy. With his unfriendly attitude, cruel remarks, and wild brutal fighting style, he was always a real challenge in his regular form. But when he succumbed to Orochi's influence, KOF turned into a horror game. The stage turns red, an ominous theme plays in the background, and Iori loses all humanity and starts acting as an enraged beast. As for Leona, her case is even worse. We got to see a flashback of her past where she is covered in blood, the blood of her own parents who she killed herself, and now we are about to face her while being in that same state when she committed that atrocity. The danger and urgency of the setting translates perfectly in gameplay. Iori and Leona are brutally difficult to deal with. They hit very hard and keeping up with their speed is almost impossible. I remember back in the arcades, there was a rule among us players dictating that no one is allowed to pick Orochi, Iori or Leona during a versus match, or they risk to be called a cheap noob for the rest of their lives for using these two overpowered, broken characters. And that was my top 10 WTF moments in KOF. So which one of these is your favorite? Or maybe you have your own moment that I forgot to mention. In any case, share it with us in the comments. Special thanks to my patrons for their generous support. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and why not consider subscribing to the channel. Stay safe and thanks for watching.